Hi, I'm Lewis, also known as Skeffles, and welcome to my 13th devlog for my tower defense game, Project Torrim. Over the last few weeks I worked on a game and devlog for the GMT Game Jam, so it's been a little while since I released a Project Torrim devlog. Because of this, I've mostly just been working on smaller bugs and usability issues in the level editor. I was keen to do these because the list of issues was growing, and there was a very real possibility I was going to use the editor for the jam. So what have I been fixing? The first bug I looked into was a grid loading issue. When you loaded a level, the grid would become misaligned. This was because the new grid would come in at a slightly different position from the original one, and the original one didn't get cleared away. So you kind of had this weird effect where there was double the amount of lines, and one set of lines was in the wrong position. This was fixed by clearing out the old grid and then loading the new grid into the correct position. The next issue was with the sprite selection buttons. Smaller sprites were being made to repeat in order to fill up the entire button, which I disliked because it kind of made it look like that particular sprite was going to be repeated multiple times. I fixed this by having the sprites inside of these buttons fit their source image size, which I really like the idea of because you can see how big the sprite is before you use it. Unfortunately, this has had the side effect that bigger sprites will appear huge, much bigger than the actual selection button themselves, so I may have to try and add a downsizing or scaling option for these bigger types of sprites. The next issue was related to something I did a couple of weeks ago. So about 2 devlogs ago I made it so when you click in the UI the camera didn't move. However, when you clicked in the UI, tiles would still get placed down. To fix this, I disabled the cursor when it was outside of the main camera's area, which I think is a nice solution and has given me plenty of ideas about how I can optimize the cursor collision in the future. Unfortunately, there's still a similar existing issue where when you're moving the camera, then a tile will get placed down because you've clicked on the grid. I have a few ideas about how to fix this, but it's not as straightforward as this UI fix, so I'm going to have to look into that in the future. The next few issues were all related to the Resizer objects I made in the last devlog. The first one was quite simple. It was simply the fact that it was really hard to click on the edge to resize the object. So what I've done is I've implemented a property to easily change that size needed. At the moment it's 4 pixels, which is fairly easy to grab, even though sometimes I do still struggle to grab that. In the future I'd love to be able to change the image that the mouse cursor shows to give you an indication that hey, you can actually resize this object. The second Resizer object issue was that the object would snap to the sprite's source size rather than the grid size. This was actually just a small issue with the way I was calculating the resize position because I was just passing in the texture source size rather than the snap size that I wanted. The next issue with the Resizer object was the camera bug that I showed in my last devlog. After resizing an object, the camera would jump by the amount that you resized the object. This was because the code to resize the object is kind of separate from the dragging code, which already dealt with this kind of issue. So what I did to fix this was consolidate the drag and resize code together. That meant the mechanism to stop the camera from changing position was in place, and actually a lot of the code for the object is a lot better than it previously was. Another issue that was visible in the last devlog, although I don't know if I particularly pointed it out, was that the object would snap away from the mouse when you clicked to drag it. The reason this happened was it wasn't snapping to the grid properly. So I just had to adjust the object either by half the snap size or nothing. This was easily done by taking the sprite image size and moduloing by the snap size. The last issue with the Resizer object was actually a feature I wanted to add in my last devlog. This is the ability to save and load the objects with the rest of the level. The way I did this was adding an object section to my save file and then reading from that section to load the objects back into level editor. This worked out really well and it meant I could save and load objects along with tiles in the level editor. With a nice chunk of the bugs sorted and the GMT Game Jam behind me, I started to have a look at some of the last features I wanted to add to the level editor. The main feature I wanted from this was the ability to place down classes like you might add objects or prefabs in any other game engine. The first thing I needed to do to implement this was to show the sprites that represent these new classes. Previously, to load the sprites in the Sprite Picker UI, I just scanned a folder that had all of those sprites in and used that information to load the sprites. Now I needed to have additional data such as class to be present. So what I did was I created a JSON file with all of the information I wanted. This worked out really well. It allowed all the sprites to come in like they did before, but they also had additional data such as being able to stretch, being able to repeat a texture, or being able to load a different type of class. In the future, I'd love to be able to generate this file automatically with attributes on classes and inspecting the monogame content project. After I was showing the sprites with additional information, I then needed to adapt how the editor saved and loaded to include the new information. To do this, I started to change the CSV format that the file was in to more like a JSON format. The benefit of this is it's a lot easier to read and load. This is going well and the data gets saved and loaded as I expect. However, I'm not really happy with all of the code I've got, and I'm not happy with the fact that my save file now is kind of in this half CSV, half JSON format. That's just wrong. Next week I'm going to look into making sure that the save format is fully JSON, and I'm going to have a look at my classes for the level editor so you can easily serialize and deserialize the object data into the save file. Thanks for watching this devlog for Project Torrim. I'm enjoying working on this project and I hope you're enjoying watching. Give the video a like to let me know you are, comment to give me feedback, and subscribe to keep up to date with all the development progress on the game. Thank you and goodbye.